Within like 60 seconds of waking up tomorrow morning, about 80% of you listening right now will have already lost the most important psychological battle of your entire day.
Yeah, the absolute most important one.
Right. You are going to roll over, silence your alarm, and then almost unconsciously, right, you're just going to open your phone.
Oh, the classic morning trap.
Exactly. And in that single, like 3-second motion, you hand over the trajectory of your whole day to the outside world.
It's a really harsh reality to confront.
It is, yeah. Today, we're looking at why that split-second decision doesn't just, waste time. It actually actively destroys your broader long-term goals.
Yeah, because we often treat our mornings as this sort of throwaway time, right?
Yeah.
Like a blurry transition period before the quote-unquote real day begins.
Right, just getting ready.
Exactly. But the research we're diving into today flips that completely on its head.
So, welcome to today's deep dive. If you're listening to this right now, I want you to anchor yourself to a current goal you have.
Could be anything, really.
Yeah, anything. Maybe you're trying to reclaim your physical health or trying to pivot to a new career path, or maybe you're just, exhausted by the feeling of being perpetually behind.
Which is so common.
So common. We are drawing from this incredibly pragmatic source today titled The Architecture of Morning Discipline.
It's a fantastic read.
It really is. And our mission today is to explore the massive, frankly frustrating gap between just setting a goal and actually achieving it, and why the secret to closing that gap might just be hidden in the first 30 minutes after you open your eyes.
Because that gap, between intention and reality,
Mm-hmm.
that's where most people spend their entire lives.
Yep.
The central premise of our source material here is that having goals is functionally meaningless if you don't have a mechanism to execute them when your motivation inevitably evaporates.
Okay, let's unpack this because, we've all been there. It's midnight on a Sunday. You watch some inspiring documentary and you just feel this overwhelming surge of motivation.
You're ready to conquer the world.
Right. You swear you're going to change your life. But motivation is an emotion.
Yes.
And like all emotions, it's tied to your immediate physiological state. So when the alarm screams at 6 a.m. and you're cold and you're tired and groggy.
The worst feeling.
Yeah. That midnight motivation is scientifically incapable of getting you out of bed.
Precisely. Relying on motivation is like relying on the weather to power a sailboat.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Right. It's great when the wind is actually blowing,
Yeah.
but you are completely stranded when it stops.
Totally stranded.
What the architecture of this approach argues is that because motivation is neurologically unreliable, we need a mechanical engine instead.
Mm-hmm.
And that engine is self-discipline.
Okay.
But the text goes a step further and really localizes it. It argues that this discipline absolutely must be anchored in the morning.
See, I have to push back on that localization just a bit.
Sure.
Because, I know plenty of night owls who do their best work at midnight. Why this aggressive emphasis on the morning specifically? Why can't I just build my discipline engine at, 10 p.m. after the house is quiet?
Well, what's fascinating here is the neurobiological reality of a morning versus an evening. The morning represents a true physiological fresh start.
Okay, how so?
So when you wake up after a proper sleep cycle, your brain has literally cleared out adenosine.
Adenosine.
Yeah, it's the neurotransmitter that makes you feel tired. So you are operating with a replenished cognitive battery.
Oh, I see.
By 10 p.m., even if the house is totally quiet, you are carrying the cognitive residue of your entire day.
Oh, wow. Yeah, like all the stress.
Exactly. Every email you answered, every traffic jam you sat in, every minor frustration, they have all chipped away at your executive function.
So the morning is really the only window where you are truly operating from baseline.
Exactly. It's a blank canvas. Think about the architecture of a typical day. The morning is the only sliver of time before the world rushes in.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's the time before text notifications, before urgent client emails, and before the endless cascade of unexpected problems demands your attention. Once the day gets going, your attention is hijacked. It is no longer yours.
That makes me think of like a mechanical analogy.
Okay, let's hear it.
If your long-term goal is a destination on a map, motivation's just the spark plug. It gets the engine to turn over.
Right.
But self-discipline is the combustion engine itself. It's the vehicle. And the morning is the only time you can actually perform maintenance on that engine without someone else trying to jump in and drive the car.
That is a highly accurate way to visualize it.
Mm-hmm.
You had to control the vehicle before the chaos of the day forces you into the passenger seat.
Which brings up a really confrontational question from the source material. So if you're listening right now, I really want you to genuinely ask yourself this.
It's a tough one.
It is. What does self-discipline actually mean to you? Are you utilizing your morning window to tune your own engine, or are you immediately handing the keys over to external demands?
And honestly, how you answer that question dictates not just your morning, but your baseline stress level for the next 15 hours.
Yeah. And that leads us to the actual execution, right? We understand the biological and strategic advantage of the morning now.
Yes.
But how are we supposed to spend it? Because I'll be honest, when I read the phrase disciplined morning routine, my eyes immediately rolled.
Oh, I don't blame you at all.
Right. We are so saturated with this toxic hustle culture, like influencers screaming at us to wake up at 3 a.m.
Take a freezing ice bath.
Yes. Take an ice bath, trade crypto, and run a half marathon before the sun even comes up. It feels exhausting, not disciplined. Do we really need a schedule like that?
It is an entirely fair critique, and the research actually completely invalidates that whole hustle culture approach.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah. The architecture we're looking at explicitly separates discipline from punishment. A disciplined morning routine does not need to be grueling. In fact, if it's too complex, it's destined to fail. The focus in the text is entirely on two specific mechanics: consistency and intentionality.
Consistency and intention.
Exactly. It's not about the intensity of the task. It's about the purpose behind the task.
Let's ground this in reality by looking at the two contrasting scenarios provided in the material. The tale of two mornings, basically.
Yes, this is a great breakdown.
Because I think scenario A is going to sound painfully familiar to almost everyone listening.
Scenario A is the reactive morning. The alarm goes off, the person wakes up, and immediately reaches for their phone to begin scrolling.
The dreaded doom scroll.
The doom scroll, exactly.
But let's look at the actual neurological cause of what's happening there. We treat doom scrolling like a harmless habit, like, oh, I'm just waking up. But what is it actually doing to us before we even get out of bed?
It is devastating to your cognitive baseline. When you reach for your phone first thing, you are spiking your dopamine levels with cheap, unearned stimuli before your brain has even naturally cleared its sleep inertia. More importantly, you're exposing yourself to the news, to other people's curated lives, and to unread messages.
Just a flood of information.
Yes. You are flooding your system with cortisol. You are throwing your nervous system into a reactive fight-or-flight threat state before your feet have even touched the floor.
And the time warp effect is very real with that, too. 30 minutes just evaporate. Then an hour.
Oh, easily.
And the source uses a very specific word to describe how their person feels when they finally stand up. Overwhelmed.
Yep, overwhelmed.
They are chronically behind before the day has even started because their brain has just processed like 1,000 pieces of unrelated high-stress information.
Now, contrast that with scenario B in the text, which is the intentional morning.
Right.
The person wakes up, but instead of reaching for a screen, they take a few deliberate offline actions.
Okay, like what?
Well, they drink a glass of water, they do 10 minutes of light stretching, they review their core goals for the year, and they spend 20 minutes reading a meaningful book.
Notice there are no ice baths there.
No ice bath.
No marathons. Just hydration, movement, orientation, and input that they actually chose for themselves.
And the psychological difference is monumental.
Yeah.
In scenario B, you are preserving the vacuum of the morning. You are asserting autonomy.
Right, you're in control.
Exactly. By controlling your environment and your inputs, you keep your cortisol levels stable. You allow your brain to wake up naturally rather than shocking it into a state of reaction.
So what does this all mean? It means highly productive people aren't necessarily doing superhuman things at 5 a.m.
Not at all.
They are just deliberately choosing activities that support long-term goals, like meditating, journaling, or learning a skill, and they are violently protecting that time from reactive behaviors.
Yes.
It sets the tone for the entire day.
And setting the tone isn't just some cliche, right? It's a measurable physiological state.
Really?
Yeah. If you start your day reacting to chaos, your brain gets primed to look for chaos. You'll spend the rest of the day in a reactive crouch, basically just waiting for the next emergency.
Oh, I hate that feeling.
Right. But if you start your day with calm, intentional autonomy, you carry that regulated nervous system into your afternoon meetings.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Let's look at the micro scale versus the macro scale.
Okay.
Because in the grand scheme of a single Tuesday, the difference between drinking a glass of water and checking Instagram seems totally trivial.
It feels insignificant in the moment.
Exactly. If I scroll social media for 20 minutes today, my life doesn't collapse. If I read a book for 20 minutes, I don't magically get a promotion.
True.
So why does the source argue that scenario B is the absolute ultimate dividing line between success and failure?
Because it forces us to look at the hidden physics of human behavior. Momentum and compounding.
Right, compounding.
We drastically underestimate the power of compounding actions. The text draws a direct parallel to financial investments.
Oh, I love this analogy.
It's so clear, right? If you invest a tiny amount of money every single day, the daily change in your net worth is imperceptible. You don't even notice it. But over a decade, it grows into staggering wealth.
It's the exact same mathematical principle applied to neuroplasticity and personal growth.
Exactly. When you repeat an intentional action every morning, you are myelinating neural pathways in your brain.
Wait, myelinating?
Yeah, you are literally wiring your brain to make that action easier and more automatic over time. Good habits compound. But the danger, and the reason we usually quit, is that the results are agonizingly gradual.
We want the cinematic movie montage.
Of course we do.
We want to read one book for 20 minutes and wake up tomorrow speaking fluent Spanish. We crave immediate dramatic feedback.
And when the universe doesn't give us that immediate feedback, we just assume the habit isn't working.
Yeah, we think, well, that 20 minutes of reading was a waste of time.
Right. But self-discipline isn't built in a single dramatic leap. It is built one agonizingly ordinary decision at a time. And as those decisions stack up, day after day, they generate momentum.
Momentum is the great equalizer. It's the force that keeps an object moving once it starts.
Yeah.
If you win the first hour of your day, your brain subconsciously categorizes you as a person who succeeds.
It changes your identity.
Exactly. It becomes easier to make the right choice at lunch and the right choice at 3 p.m. because you are already in motion.
You aren't forcing yourself through willpower anymore. You're letting the momentum carry you.
This brings up another critical question from the source that I want you, the listener, to process right now.
I have a good one.
Do you believe discipline is more important than motivation? Think about it. Motivation might get you to buy the running shoes on day one.
Sure.
But it's discipline, that stubborn trust in the math of compounding, that gets you to lace them up on day 100 when it's raining and you haven't seen any weight loss yet.
It's so true.
You have to stay on track and trust that the biological and psychological investments you are making every morning are accumulating, even when you can't check the balance of your personal growth account.
It requires a really profound level of delayed gratification.
Okay, but let's get ruthlessly practical for a second.
Let's do it.
I can sit here and logically agree that compounding habits lead to success. I know that doom scrolling spikes my cortisol and ruins my baseline.
We all know it.
Yet knowing all of this, why is it still so unbelievably difficult to actually do the right thing when that alarm goes off? Why do I still hit snooze?
It's the ultimate question.
The source reveals a tactical truth here that shifted my entire perspective.
Yeah.
The battle for the morning is actually won the night before.
This is where we move from theory to actual survival tactics.
Right.
To understand why we fail in the morning, despite our best intentions, we have to examine a psychological phenomenon called decision fatigue.
Decision fatigue.
Yeah. Your brain operates like a battery. Every single choice you make drains that battery.
Ego depletion. Right?
Exactly. And it doesn't matter if it's a massive decision like signing a mortgage or a micro decision like choosing between a blue shirt or a black shirt.
It all costs energy.
They both draw from the same well of cognitive energy. If you wake up and your brain immediately has to process 10 micro decisions, what to wear, what to eat, where your gym shoes are, what task to tackle first, you are rapidly depleting your battery before you've accomplished anything meaningful.
The source refers to this as friction, and I think friction is just the perfect word.
It really is.
When we wake up, we are groggy, our sleep inertia is heavy, and our willpower is at its absolute lowest.
The lowest point of the day.
Right. The brain is an energy-saving machine. It will automatically look for the path of least resistance. If I wake up and I have to decide what workout to do, and then I have to go hunt for my headphones, well, that is friction.
So much friction.
And the moment my brain encounters that friction, it's going to say, you know what? Let's just stay in bed and check email. That's zero friction.
The primary goal of a routine, therefore, is to provide structure.
Yeah.
Because structure engineers a completely frictionless morning. You have to remove the decision-making process entirely. The architecture of discipline dictates that highly successful individuals do their thinking the night before, when they are awake and their battery is full.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
They lay out their clothes, they plan their top 3 priorities, they organize their workspaces, and set up the coffee maker.
You are essentially being a good manager for your future self.
Exactly.
Your evening self does the strategy. Your morning self just acts as the employee who executes. You wake up, the clothes are there, you put them on, the book is on the table, you open it.
No thinking required.
Right. The priorities are written on the notepad, you review them. There is no mental negotiation because the decisions have already been made.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this kind of aggressive preparation offers a psychological benefit that goes far beyond just saving time.
What's that?
It constructs a localized environment of control. Let's be honest, life is inherently unpredictable and often chaotic. You might step out of your house and immediately face a delayed train, a difficult client, or a family emergency.
Things you have absolutely zero control over.
Precisely. You cannot control the storm. But when you begin your day with a frictionless, intentional routine, you establish a fortified foundation.
A foundation, yeah.
By executing those early commitments to yourself, you generate a deep, internal proof of competence. You prove that you can govern your own actions.
Wow.
When the inevitable chaos of the day strikes at 11 a.m., you don't shatter because you are anchored by the victories of your morning. You are able to navigate the difficulties from a stance of grounded resilience rather than a stance of reactive panic.
I know what some of you are thinking right now. You're listening and thinking, look, I have 2 toddlers, a dog that needs walking, and an hour commute. My morning isn't a serene, blank canvas. It's a war zone.
A very real scenario.
Very real. But that is exactly why this preparation isn't just a luxury for the hyper-productive. It's a survival tactic. If your morning is naturally chaotic, reducing decision friction the night before is the only way you survive without burning out by noon.
It becomes even more vital the less time you have.
Before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to toss 2 final prompts from the material your way, directly to you listening. Really chew on these today.
They are great questions.
First, what changes would you like to make to your morning routine? Look at your current morning realistically. What is one source of friction you can eliminate tonight?
Just one small thing.
Yep. And second, how can technology help or harm your self-discipline? Is it a tool that reduces friction, like an audiobook queued up, or is it a trapdoor that drops you into reactive doom scrolling?
Identifying the trapdoors is always the first step to avoiding them.
So, to synthesize everything we've unpacked today, self-discipline is not the dramatic, cinematic transformation we've been sold.
No, it's not.
It is not about making one extraordinary, perfect decision or having a grueling schedule. It is the quiet, unglamorous process of making ordinary decisions consistently.
Consistency is everything.
Every single morning is a reset button. It's a new chance to focus, improve, and be a little better than yesterday. Your future is shaped by what you do consistently, not occasionally when you feel a burst of inspiration.
And exploring that idea of systemic consistency brings up one final, somewhat counterintuitive thought I really want to leave you with.
Oh, I like this part.
We spent this entire time analyzing how a disciplined routine creates a foundation of control against life's unpredictability.
Right.
But consider this. What if the ultimate test of your self-discipline isn't just how perfectly you follow your routine when life is calm?
Okay.
What if the true measure of discipline is how quickly you can forgive yourself and reset when life inevitably forces you to break it?
Oh, wow.
Does true discipline require the flexibility to simply try again the next morning without carrying the heavy, paralyzing guilt of yesterday's failure?
That is such a brilliant reframe because the engine of discipline is going to stall out sometimes.
It absolutely will.
You are going to oversleep or get sick or cave and just scroll your phone. True discipline isn't pretending the engine never breaks down. It's having the grace and the tools to reboot it the next day.
Without punishing yourself.
Without punishing yourself, exactly. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Take these ideas, keep learning, keep growing, and start building the habits that create the life you want, starting tomorrow morning.
So think of, the absolute hardest thing you've learned to do in the last 5 years.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's a big question right out of the gate.
Right. I mean, maybe it's a complex software program at work or, a new language, or even just figuring out how to manage a team.
Yeah, anything that really pushed your limits.
Exactly. So you've got it in your head. Now, I want you to be totally honest.
Yeah.
When was the last time you actually paused, stepped back, and just patted yourself on the back for mastering it?
If you're anything like most high achievers, the answer to that is probably, well, never.
Yeah, never. And that brings us to the core of our deep dive today. We're looking at this specific cognitive trap that keeps really dedicated learners in a state of just like perpetual dissatisfaction.
It's a massive blind spot, honestly. We are culturally and frankly neurologically wired to constantly stare at the horizon. We only look at the things we haven't conquered yet.
Yeah.
And we treat our past achievements like these checked boxes that just instantly lose all their value the second we check them.
Which is so wild, but so true. So for today's deep dive, we have a narrative source from the Easy English podcast. It's titled, Talk About Your Proud Moment. And, on the surface, it's a story about language acquisition, but really it's this masterclass in the quiet, completely overlooked power of recognizing our own progress.
Yeah, the psychology of it is fascinating.
Right. So let's set the stage. Our source follows a learner named Emily, and she is like the quintessential high achiever. She's kind, hardworking, takes her studies incredibly seriously.
Very resilient.
Super resilient. But despite having all these objective markers of success, she suffers from this really debilitating inability to feel proud of herself.
Which, is incredibly common, and the source illustrates exactly how her mindset operates, mostly through her reflexes.
Yeah, her immediate reaction.
Exactly. Whenever someone compliments her progress, she immediately deploys these defensive deflections. She'll say things like, oh, it was nothing, or anyone could do it, or my personal favorite, I'm still not good enough. She just brushes the praise away before it can even, register in her brain.
It's like she treats compliments as a threat to her momentum.
That is a great way to put it, yeah. And to show us the depth of this issue, the text gives us a very specific scenario.
Right.
We see Emily at her desk, and she's studying this advanced English article. And the narrative makes a real point to emphasize that just a couple of years ago, this exact text would have looked like hieroglyphics to her.
Completely impossible read.
Completely impossible. But today, right now, she's reading it, she's processing it, and she understands almost everything.
But she doesn't actually register that victory at all, does she?
Not even a little bit.
Her internal monologue is just, my English still isn't perfect. She completely zeroes in on the, 2 or 3 vocabulary words she didn't know and entirely ignores the hundreds of complex words she processed effortlessly.
Right. What Emily is experiencing here is what psychologists call the arrival fallacy, but it's mixed with a really healthy dose of the hedonic treadmill.
Okay. Unpack that for us a bit.
Sure. So the arrival fallacy is this illusion that once we reach a certain goal, we will finally feel successful and happy.
Like, I'll be happy when I finally learn this.
Exactly. But because she's on that hedonic treadmill, the moment she reaches a new baseline of competence, like reading that article, her brain just immediately normalizes it.
The goalpost just completely moves.
The goalpost moves. And this relentless focus on the next goal doesn't just make you unappreciative, it actually actively overwrites the neural memory of your past struggles.
Wow.
You literally forget how hard it used to be.
It reminds me so much of updating your phone's operating system.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Right. Because for months, you deal with this laggy, glitchy phone. Apps keep crashing. It's so frustrating. Then, the second the new software update is installed and those old glitches are gone, you completely forget you ever even had them.
It's instant amnesia.
Instant.
Yeah.
Within 5 minutes, you're furious about some tiny new quirk in the interface. You just instantly adapt to the new baseline and demand perfection from there.
That's exactly how the brain treats skill acquisition.
But I have to ask, is this constant dissatisfaction just the inevitable price of being a driven person? Don't we need that perpetual hunger, that slight misery to keep pushing forward?
Well, it's a fair question, and it's actually the exact rationalization most high achievers use to justify their own anxiety.
Oh, totally.
But the answer is no. Dissatisfaction might provide a short-term adrenaline spike, but it is a terrible long-term fuel source.
It just leads to burnout.
It leads directly to burnout. And to see the mechanics of how to fix this, we really have to look at what happens to Emily next in the source, because she doesn't break out of this loop on her own.
No, she needs an external disruption. And her English teacher is the one who provides that disruption. It happens during a regular class. The teacher walks in and writes this seemingly simple prompt on the board. He writes, what is a moment in your life that made you feel proud?
And the contrast in the room is immediate. The other students instantly gravitate toward these macro milestones.
The big stuff.
Right. One talks about the day they graduated from university. Another brings up landing a major new job. Someone else discusses navigating a massive family crisis.
They're pulling out the big, socially validated life events.
Mm-hmm.
But when it gets to Emily, she just draws a total blank.
Mm-hmm.
She sits there genuinely confused and actually says out loud, I don't think I've done anything special.
Which is so painful to read.
It's so frustrating as an outside observer, because we know she studies constantly. But her teacher does something brilliant here.
He really does.
He doesn't argue with her self-assessment. He just asks her one question. He says, do you remember your first day learning English?
And that is the pivotal intervention. The teacher understands that Emily is trapped in her current baseline. By asking about day one, he forces her brain to change its anchor point.
Okay. Change its anchor point. Explain that.
Well, human beings are actually terrible at absolute evaluation. We only really understand things through relativity and contrast.
Right.
So when the teacher forces her to look at day one, she actually laughs because she suddenly remembers that she couldn't even introduce herself back then.
Wow.
And then the teacher lists her current reality. He says, she holds complex conversations, she reads books, understands podcasts, communicates globally.
He essentially forces her to look at the before and after pictures side by side.
Precisely. And it just shatters her blind spot. The teacher says, that sounds like an achievement to me. And Emily is left completely speechless because the objective contrast is undeniable.
Her brain just can't argue with the data anymore.
Exactly.
And that interaction sends her home to do some literal digging. She goes into a drawer and pulls out her old English notebooks from years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And as she turns the pages, she's looking at her own handwriting, reading these incredibly basic sentences. Things like, hello, my name is Emily. I like coffee.
Yeah.
Seeing those basic words suddenly brings back the visceral memory of how terrifying every single interaction used to feel. And it makes me wonder if imposter syndrome is so prevalent among learners. Is actively seeking out our past, embarrassing beginner steps, the actual cure?
I mean, it is arguably the most effective, neurologically grounded cure we have.
Really?
Yeah, because imposter syndrome thrives in a vacuum of context. When you're constantly comparing yourself to the experts who are ahead of you, your brain just concludes you're a fraud.
Right, because you're not them yet.
Exactly. But when you actively hold the tangible, physical evidence of your own incompetence from 3 years ago, like those old notebooks, you ground yourself in objective reality.
But you literally hold the proof.
You prove to your own nervous system that your current skills aren't a fluke. Growth wasn't magic. It was mechanics.
Okay, so if it's about mechanics, what exactly was she doing during those years to bridge that gap? Because looking at the notebooks shows her that she improved, but the source also dives into the specific materials she used.
It does, yeah.
And what really strikes me is how incredibly unglamorous the whole process was.
Oh, it's a perfect study in the architecture of cognitive load. The source outlines several specific tools she used, and each one targets a completely different mechanism of learning.
Okay, like what?
Well, for instance, in her early days, she used a book called Short Stories in English for Beginners. And the text notes, she couldn't just breeze through it.
Right.
She had to sit there with a dictionary, agonizingly looking up words, rereading the same paragraphs over and over again.
Which sounds completely exhausting. I mean, why wouldn't she just use a translation app to scan the page and get the gist of it instantly?
Because of a concept called desirable difficulty.
Desirable difficulty.
Right. If learning is too easy, like if you just scan a translation app, the brain doesn't bother to encode the information into long-term memory. The sheer friction of stopping, opening a dictionary, finding the word, and plugging it back into the sentence context that creates deeper neural pathways. The struggle is exactly what makes the memory stick.
That makes so much sense. The friction is the feature, not a bug.
Exactly.
And then the source mentions she moves to a book called English Vocabulary in Use. But it emphasizes that she only learned a few new words a day. Not a massive list of 50 words, just a tiny handful.
Which is exactly how she managed her cognitive load. The hippocampus, that's the part of the brain responsible for consolidating new memories, it has a strict daily limit.
Mm-hmm.
If you try to memorize 50 words, you overwhelm the system, and by the next morning, you've forgotten 48 of them.
Right, you just lose it all.
But by restricting her ambition to just 3 or 4 words a day, she ensured a near 100% retention rate. It feels slower in the moment, but it compounds massively over a year.
So she's basically avoiding the fire hose approach.
Exactly. And as she advanced, she shifted her methods to reduce that friction. The source notes she started using Learn English through stories and listening to a program called Effortless English while going on daily walks. She would repeat sentences aloud, sometimes whispering quietly to herself, sometimes speaking confidently.
So she's pairing physical movement with language repetition.
Yes, which lowers the affective filter.
What's that?
It's basically the psychological wall of stress and anxiety that blocks language acquisition. By walking and listening to stories she enjoyed, she moved from explicit, forced memorization into implicit, natural absorption.
But, if we step back and look at that whole process, struggling with a dictionary, strictly limiting yourself to 3 words a day, whispering to yourself on a walking trail, it all feels like a massive grind.
It is a grind, you're right.
Right. So if the actual process of growth feels like this constant invisible struggle, how on earth are you supposed to spot a victory while you are still in the trenches?
Well, the hard truth is you usually can't spot it in the trenches because daily progress is invisible. Your brain literally can't perceive the difference between Tuesday's skill level and Wednesday's skill level.
It's too small.
Way too small. But the source answers your question by showing how all those invisible, compounding micro efforts eventually collide with an unscripted, real-world test.
Right.
And that test becomes the definitive proof.
Okay, so this is where the essay prompt finally triggers a specific memory for her. Emily is sitting there trying to write about a proud moment, and suddenly she remembers something from 2 years prior. She was at a museum, and a tourist who was clearly lost approached her and asked for the exit in English.
A completely spontaneous encounter. No dictionaries, no preparation.
And the text says her heart started beating wildly. Her mind was racing. But she didn't freeze up. She answered the tourist, gave him clear directions to the exit. He said, "Thank you very much," she replied. "You're welcome," and they walked away.
And how long did the source say that entire interaction lasted?
Less than a minute. A 60-second exchange. How does an interaction that brief carry so much psychological weight for her?
Because it was the ultimate test of spontaneous competence. Think about it. For years, her learning was confined to controlled environments, right? Her bedroom, her notebooks, her classroom.
Safe spaces.
Very safe. But out in the wild, when the environment was entirely unpredictable, her brain effortlessly retrieved the vocabulary, structured the grammar, and delivered the communication.
She didn't have time to doubt herself.
Exactly. She just reacted. And the dopamine loop of realizing, wait, I actually just did that, is incredibly powerful. It proved that the language was no longer just something she was studying. It was a tool she possessed.
But here's the part that drives me crazy.
What's that?
She had this monumental realization of her own competence. It felt amazing in the moment, and then she completely forgot about it for 2 years.
Yeah.
She just filed it away and went right back to agonizing over her grammar mistakes. Why did she just toss that memory in the trash?
Because of how human beings encode significant memories, we are completely conditioned to prioritize events that come with external validation.
You mean like the macro milestones the other students talked about?
Exactly. When you graduate university, society gives you a ceremony, a piece of paper, and a party.
Right.
When you get a promotion, you get a new title and a paycheck. Those external markers signal to the brain, hey, this is important, remember this. But a 60-second interaction with the lost tourist in a museum doesn't come with a certificate. It is a purely internal milestone. And unless we make a conscious, deliberate effort to log it, the brain just discards it to free up processing power for the next immediate problem to solve.
It's like spending 3 years laying the bricks to build a house by hand, and the only thing you ever take a picture of is the ribbon-cutting ceremony at the end.
Yes.
You completely ignore the thousands of individual bricks you perfectly leveled along the way. We assume a proud moment has to be something that impresses other people.
And the source argues forcefully against that assumption. A proud moment doesn't require an audience. It doesn't need to be famous. It only needs to matter to the individual who put in the work.
Which brings us to the ripple effect of her realizing this. Because the next week in class, the students have to present their essays.
Right.
Emily stands up, and she doesn't just read a sterile, sanitized list of her academic achievements.
Yeah.
She actually tells her story. She talks openly about her fears, her constant struggles, the embarrassing mistakes she made, and finally, she shares the 60-second story about the museum tourist.
And the reaction of her peers is the most telling part of the whole narrative. The room goes completely quiet. Then the validation pours in. One of her classmates raises a hand and admits, I always focus on what I can't do. Another student nods and says, me too.
That shared vulnerability completely changes the dynamic of the room. It proves that this amnesia for our own progress isn't just Emily's quirk. It is a widespread epidemic among learners.
It really is. Emily realizes she isn't alone. And that realization allows her to confront the ultimate core of her problem.
Which is?
For years, she actively avoided feeling proud because she equated pride with arrogance.
Oh, wow.
She genuinely believed that if she paused to say, "I did a good job," she was claiming to be perfect or signaling that she was better than her peers.
And I think that's a fear a lot of us share, honestly. We are terrified that if we acknowledge our success, we'll lose our edge. We think pride will make us complacent or worse, obnoxious. But the text redefines it completely.
Yeah.
Emily discovers that being proud does not mean thinking you are flawless. It simply means recognizing your effort.
It's an accounting exercise, really.
Yeah.
It means looking at the ledger, appreciating the growth, and honoring the very real, very difficult challenges that you managed to overcome.
It's keeping the receipts of your own hard work.
Exactly.
Paid the price in frustration, in time, in desirable difficulty. You are fully entitled to look at those receipts and say, look at what I built.
Precisely. And acknowledging your past doesn't sabotage your future. You can still maintain your high standards.
Right.
You can still possess a burning desire to reach the next level of fluency or competence. But as the source illustrates, effort deserves respect. If you don't respect your own effort, your brain will eventually stop supplying the motivation to keep trying.
So as we synthesize all of this for you, the listener, the core takeaway is pretty clear. So many of us are spending our lives furiously running on that hedonic treadmill, right? Chasing the next achievement or the next skill level. And while our eyes are locked on the horizon, we are completely ignoring the miles of difficult terrain we just successfully navigated.
The destination is just a temporary marker. The journey is where the actual cognitive and personal transformation takes place.
Which brings us to a very specific call to action, drawn directly from the challenge in the Easy English podcast.
Yeah, I love this part.
Take a moment today. Actually, pull out a physical piece of paper, open a fresh note on your phone, and write down one moment that makes you proud.
Just one.
It's just one. It doesn't matter if it's massive or incredibly micro. It could be a 60-second interaction from yesterday or an invisible milestone from 10 years ago. Do it because, just like Emily, you have navigated more complexity than you think, and you have achieved far more than you are giving yourself credit for.
And as you write that down, I want to leave you with one final thought to ponder.
Okay, let's hear it.
If we habitually refuse to log our past successes, if our default mode is to obsess only over our current flaws and deficits, are we accidentally training our own nervous systems to believe that we never actually succeeded at anything?
Oh, man.
Right. What if the quiet act of recording our small wins isn't just some fluffy, feel-good exercise, but the vital neurological fuel we require to actually reach that horizon?
That is a lot to think about.
It really is. So your palms are sweating.
Oh, yeah. We've all been there.
Right. Your heart is just racing. You've studied the material for over 2 years. You've read the books. You've done all the prep work. And yet the second someone actually looks at you and asks this question,
Blank.
completely blank, your mind just goes totally empty. Yeah. I mean, it's a deeply frustrating phenomenon, where all those hours of isolated preparation just seem to completely evaporate the second the spotlight hits you in the real world.
It really is this universal and just physically overwhelming experience because the knowledge is trapped in your head, right?
Yeah.
But the bridge to actually vocalize it just sort of collapses under pressure.
Exactly. So today we are doing a deep dive into this really inspiring case study from the Easy English podcast. It's titled The Courage to Speak, Michael's Journey to Fluency.
It's a great story.
It really is. And our mission for this deep dive is to extract the exact step-by-step framework that Michael used to overcome that paralyzing fear of real-world application. We want to show you how to transition from that, endless, comfortable cycle of preparation into actual confident performance.
Right, because we're looking at this not just as a story about language, but really as a masterclass in crossing what we can call the cognitive gaps of learning.
A cognitive gap.
Yeah, the gap between knowing something passively and executing it actively.
Yeah.
Because that gap is massive. And Michael's story gives us a blueprint for crossing it by addressing the psychology of fear, the mechanics of memory, and the physical reality of acquiring a new skill.
Okay, let's unpack this because Michael's initial situation serves as the absolute perfect baseline. So we are introduced to a learner who has been rigorously studying English for almost 2 years. And I mean rigorous in the traditional sense, right?
Very traditional.
He's reviewing vocabulary lists every single morning. Every evening, he sits down to study grammar rules. He's listening to English podcasts almost daily.
Wow.
Yeah, so his passive knowledge, his ability to consume information is huge. He understands movies, he follows complex video essays, he comprehends the vocabulary when he reads it.
So on paper, or maybe in a standardized testing environment, he's the model student. He has acquired all the data.
But then, and this is where it falls apart, someone actually speaks to him in real life.
Right.
A spontaneous interaction occurs, and the physical panic just sets in. The source text describes it so vividly. It's that sudden spike in heart rate, the sweaty palms, and this crazy sudden inability to recall simple, basic words that he fundamentally knows.
Yeah, that biological response is so real.
I actually want to look at the biology of this for a second, because it isn't just a metaphor. When he feels that social pressure, he is experiencing an amygdala hijack. His brain is perceiving the pressure of a social evaluation as a literal physical threat.
Right. And that physiological response is crucial to understand. The moment the amygdala perceives that threat of judgment or failure, it just floods the system with cortisol.
Stress hormone.
Exactly. And that stress hormone effectively acts as a roadblock to the prefrontal cortex, which is where your working memory and complex thought generation live. So the physical stress response literally blocks cognitive access to the information he spent 2 years memorizing.
Which leads to that agonizing post-conversation loop.
Oh, the worst.
You know the one. He walks away from the interaction, the cortisol finally subsides, the prefrontal cortex comes back online, and suddenly he thinks, oh man, I should have said that differently. I knew that word. Why couldn't I remember it?
Because the effort is clearly there. The raw data is stored in his brain, but he just has no functional retrieval mechanism under pressure.
It reminds me of someone who spends 2 years reading these thick, complicated manuals on how to swim.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Right. Like they memorized the complex physics of hydrodynamics, they studied diagrams of different stroke techniques, they understand water resistance perfectly, but they absolutely refuse to actually jump into a pool until they are certain, like 100% certain, that they won't make a splash.
Yeah, they have mistaken the study of the activity for the activity itself. They're optimizing for a theoretical environment rather than a practical one.
Exactly. And Michael eventually has an epiphany about this exact trap. He's watching this online video, and the instructor delivers a deceptively simple quote. He says, "You don't learn to speak English by studying English. You learn to speak English by speaking English."
Wow.
Yeah. Michael literally pauses the video to let that sink in. He realizes he has been using the pursuit of perfection as a shield.
What's fascinating here is the psychological trap of that waiting game. Well, waiting for a state of quote-unquote perfection is incredibly common, and it operates as a highly effective defense mechanism. Because studying feels safe, Sitting alone in a room with a textbook gives you the illusion of progress while keeping you in complete control.
Because no one is watching you.
Exactly. You aren't making mistakes in front of another human being. Execution, on the other hand, is inherently vulnerable. It exposes your current limitations. So learners frequently substitute studying for doing. They use the rationale of, I'm just trying to get my grammar perfect before I try, as a convenient, socially acceptable excuse for inaction.
A socially acceptable excuse. Wow. We can call that the courage gap.
The courage gap, yeah.
And the way Michael crosses this gap is step 1 of his new framework. He realizes he has to start speaking, but he needs to bypass that amygdala hijack we talked about. So he engineers an environment with the lowest possible stakes. The very next morning, he sits alone in his room after breakfast, looks around, and simply starts speaking out loud to the empty space. Just things like, "Good morning, my name's Michael. Today I will go to work. The weather looks nice."
It sounds so simple, but by removing the audience, he removes the social threat. He completely lowers the affective filter, which is that emotional barrier that prevents learning and performance.
Right. And he does this for 10 minutes. He narrates his breakfast, his plans for the day, his hobbies. The text actually notes that his own voice sounds strange and uncomfortable to him at first.
How about that?
But when he finishes the 10 minutes, he has a profound realization. It wasn't perfect. He definitely made grammatical errors, but he actually produced the language. He generated speech.
That's a huge hurdle to clear.
Huge. From there, he escalates to step 2, tackling what we might call the retrieval gap. He takes a book called Short Stories in English for Beginners, but he abandons passive reading. Instead, after reading a single story, he closes the book, completely removing the visual safety net, and forces himself to verbally summarize the plot out loud.
Okay, taking away the visual cue is a massive escalation in cognitive difficulty.
It is, and the source material is very honest about how hard this is for him. He struggles immensely. He forgets vocabulary words he just read 30 seconds prior.
Oh, sure.
He pauses for several seconds at a time, just staring at the wall, fighting to construct a single sentence. But wait, I have to push back on this method for a second.
Okay, what's the concern?
Well, if you are sitting completely alone in your bedroom, struggling to string words together, pausing awkwardly and undeniably making grammatical errors with no native speaker there to correct you, are you actively reinforcing bad habits? Like, isn't this kind of isolated, uncorrected practice potentially dangerous for long-term skill acquisition?
I hear that all the time. That is the most common hesitation learners have with solo practice, but it fundamentally misinterprets how the brain acquires and stabilizes a new skill. Yeah, there is a vast neurobiological difference between passive recognition, seeing a word and knowing what it means, and active recall. When Michael closes that book and struggles to summarize the story, the value of the exercise has absolutely nothing to do with grammatical perfection.
So what is the value?
The value is in the struggle itself. He is forcing his brain to retrieve information under the internal pressure of needing to generate the next word.
You're saying the struggle is the actual mechanism of learning?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Every time he forces his brain to search for a word without looking it up, he is triggering a process called myelination along his neural pathways. He's basically thickening the insulation around the neurons that connect his thought to his vocal cords.
Oh, wow.
So the goal of this solo practice isn't to be accurate. It is to build the physical habit of speech generation. You can always refine and clean up grammar later, but you cannot correct the grammar of someone who is too paralyzed to speak.
That is such a good point.
Right? By stumbling through these summaries alone, he's proving to his nervous system that it is safe to try, fail, and keep going without any catastrophic consequences.
Okay, that completely reframes the entire concept of a mistake. But here's the ceiling Michael hits with talking to an empty room, right? It builds courage, and it builds retrieval pathways, but it doesn't build new vocabulary.
True.
You can only talk to your bedroom walls about your breakfast for so long before you literally run out of things to say.
Yeah, the inputs have to match the outputs eventually.
Exactly. To grow, he had to change how he consumed new information, bridging the gap between abstract data and usable language. He was using a textbook called English Vocabulary in Use, but he decides to completely abandon the traditional method of memorizing rote lists of translated words.
Which is smart because rote memorization relies on the brain's working memory, which is notoriously inefficient for long-term retention of disconnected facts.
Right, so he intuitively shifts to a much deeper cognitive strategy. He starts creating deeply personal examples for every single new word he encounters.
Oh, I love this.
It's brilliant. If the vocabulary word is achievement, he doesn't just read the definition, he constructs a sentence directly related to his life and says it out loud. He says, "Learning English is one of my biggest achievements."
Mm-hmm.
If the word is challenge, he says, "Speaking English is a challenge, but I enjoy it." He anchors the abstract vocabulary to his personal reality.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of cognitive science, he is leveraging a concept known as emotional tagging.
Emotional tagging.
Yeah. When you encounter isolated information, like a random vocabulary word, a statistical fact, maybe a programming command, your brain categorizes it as low priority. It has no survival or personal value.
Right, it's just noise.
Exactly. But when you tie that new information to your personal identity, your daily routine, or your emotional state, the hippocampus and the amygdala work together to tag that information with emotional salience. The brain essentially flags the data, signaling that this information is highly relevant to the individual's life and prioritizes moving it into long-term storage.
And he actually pairs this emotional tagging with a total overhaul of his listening habits, too.
Okay.
He discovers an audio program called Effortless English and begins a routine of really aggressive immersion listening. He puts the audio on everywhere.
Everywhere.
Everywhere. He listens while walking, while cleaning his apartment, during his daily commute. And because the vocabulary is now emotionally tagged and he's constantly immersed in the sounds, a major shift occurs. The English language starts to feel familiar. Expressions begin popping into his head automatically, and he crosses a massive milestone.
Let me guess, he stops translating.
Yes. He begins thinking in English rather than thinking in his native language and translating in his head.
It is huge. He's dismantling the translation barrier. He's no longer using his native language as a mediator.
It is remarkably similar to upgrading the operating system on a smartphone.
How do you mean?
Well, before this immersion, his brain was functioning like an older, clunky device. Every time he wanted to formulate a thought, he had to manually open up a mental translation app, type in the concept in his native tongue, wait for the English output, and then try to actually say it.
Which is exhausting.
He trains your cognitive battery power, it lags in real time, and it frequently crashes. But through this constant, personalized immersion, the new language ceases to be an external app. It becomes integrated into the core operating system. The processing just starts running automatically in the background.
Yeah, the reduction in cognitive load is staggering when you move from manual translation to intuitive generation.
Absolutely. But knowing the words and thinking in the language still doesn't solve the physical mechanics of speaking at a natural pace.
Like the physical side.
Which brings us to what we can call the processing gap, and the real breakthrough technique Michael discovers a few weeks later. It's a method called shadowing.
Shadowing is arguably the most potent tool in his entire framework, though it is often very misunderstood.
So the mechanics of it are straightforward but incredibly demanding. You listen to a short piece of native audio like a podcast, and you immediately repeat what the speaker is saying, word for word, sentence for sentence in real time. You are speaking over the audio, maybe just a fraction of a second behind the speaker. And the text emphasizes how impossible this felt for Michael on day one. The speaker was talking entirely too fast. Michael's own pronunciation felt awkward and clumsy, and he was missing whole chunks of sentences.
So frustrating at first.
But he pushes through. He starts with just 10 minutes a day, eventually scaling his endurance to 15 and then 20 minutes. Gradually, his rhythm locks in. But I have to play devil's advocate here because from the outside, this looks highly counterproductive.
How so?
Well, isn't shadowing just turning you into a highly trained parrot? It's like if the ultimate goal is to have a spontaneous, dynamic conversation where you are responding to unpredictable human variables, how does mindlessly mimicking a pre-recorded podcast host actually translate into formulating your own original thoughts?
It seems disconnected, I'll give you that. But that critique conflates two completely different areas of the brain. Shadowing is not about thought generation, and it isn't trying to be. It is entirely about the motor cortex and the physical muscle memory of language.
Wait, so you are saying language is a physical, athletic act, not just an intellectual one?
Fundamentally, yes. Speaking requires your jaw, your tongue, your vocal cords, and your diaphragm to coordinate highly specific micro-movements at lightning speed.
Right.
And these movement patterns are completely different from the muscle memory you developed for your native language. Shadowing artificially removes the heavy cognitive burden of figuring out what to say. The podcast host is providing the vocabulary and the grammar. Because your brain no longer has to search for words, it can allocate 100% of its processing power to how to physically articulate those sounds.
Oh, that makes sense. You isolate the variables. You separate the physical act of speaking from the intellectual act of thinking.
Exactly. You are training the articulatory loop. By practicing the physical act of speaking at native speed without the stress of generating the content, you automate the physical delivery. You teach your mouth the rhythm, the intonation, and the connected speech patterns.
So it becomes muscle memory.
Yes. Eventually, that muscle memory becomes automatic. So when you do enter a real conversation later, you have freed up massive amounts of mental bandwidth because you are no longer fighting your own tongue. Your mouth already knows how to navigate the sounds, leaving your intellect free to focus purely on the spontaneity of the conversation.
Wow. And while Michael is training his articulatory loop, he is also feeding his mindset. He reads Atomic Habits by James Clear, and this provides the philosophical glue for his entire routine.
Great book.
It is. He realizes his day-to-day progress is nearly invisible. If you measure yesterday against today, nothing seems to have changed. But over a span of months, the compound interest of shadowing, solo speaking, and emotional tagging is massive.
Compound interest is the perfect way to describe it.
And most importantly, this book finalizes his perspective shift on errors. He completely stops viewing mistakes as personal failures. He starts viewing them as neutral, vital data points indicators of exactly what he needs to adjust in the next session.
And that paradigm shift is the foundation of resilience. If mistakes are perceived as failures, the amygdala fires, cortisol releases, and you just avoid the activity.
You freeze up again.
Right. But if mistakes are perceived as vital signs of learning, you actively seek out the friction of execution to gather more data.
Which perfectly sets the stage for the climax of his journey. Here's where it gets really interesting. Michael decides he has accumulated enough solo hours. He has done the prep work, he has built the courage muscle, he has automated the physical delivery. It is time to enter the arena.
The final test.
Yes. He sees an advertisement for an online English conversation club, a live, uncontrolled environment with zero safety nets, and he signs up. The source notes that as the start time approaches, the fear returns. He almost closes his laptop.
Of course he does.
But he leans on the neural pathways he built talking to an empty room. He logs in, and suddenly he is face to face with a grid of strangers from all over the globe. Brazil, Japan, Spain, Turkey, Germany.
He is confronting the unpredictability of human interaction, but notice the environment he chose. He chose a club of other learners, people who are navigating the exact same vulnerabilities.
Yes, the moderator asks everyone to introduce themselves. Michael's heart is racing, the spotlight is on him. It is the exact scenario that paralyzed him 2 years ago. He takes a deep breath, and the words just materialize. Hello, everyone. My name is Michael.
Wow.
It's not an analogy to compare this to a jazz musician transitioning from practicing alone in basement to joining a live improvisational jam session. For months, Michael has been in the basement running scales, shadowing, building vocabulary, talking to the wall. He automated those scales.
Right.
And now, on this video call, because the scales are automatic, he can actually listen to the rhythm of the other players and respond in real time. He spends nearly an hour talking about his career, his hobbies, his struggles with the language. The other participants are smiling, asking follow-up questions, and he's answering them spontaneously.
He has successfully crossed the bridge. The knowledge in his prefrontal cortex is finally flowing through his vocal cords into the real world.
And what is his primary realization when the call ends? He realizes that he was communicating. He recognizes that he dropped a few articles. He used the wrong verb tense once or twice. But the ideas transferred from his brain to theirs seamlessly.
And that realization is the ultimate lesson of this entire case study. There is a canyon-sized distinction between communicating perfectly and communicating successfully.
Successfully, yeah.
The biological purpose of language, or really the execution of any complex skill, is the successful transfer of intent and ideas. If the idea lands, the execution is successful, regardless of a mispronounced vowel or a clumsy transition. Fluency, mastery, and confidence are not states of being you magically arrive at one day. They are constructed slowly, one sentence, one awkward conversation, and one mistake at a time.
So what does this all mean for you listening to this deep dive right now? Well, the elegance of Michael's framework is that it scales far beyond the mechanics of learning English. Whether you are attempting to pick up a foreign language, preparing for a high-stakes public speaking engagement, or trying to master a complex new coding language at work, the core cognitive truths remain identical.
They absolutely do.
You have to abandon the illusion that you will eventually feel completely ready. The state of perfect readiness never arrives because it is just a socially acceptable shield used to hide from the vulnerability of execution. Passive studying will only ever yield passive knowledge. You have to intentionally create environments where you are forced to retrieve information under pressure.
Every single time you execute, even if it is messy, even if you are just mumbling to an empty room, even if your brain blanks on the simplest concept, you are thickening those neural pathways. You are proving to your nervous system that it can survive the friction of the attempt. Every awkward, stumbling execution builds a foundation of true confidence that all the passive studying in the world simply cannot manufacture.
You really have to accept the clumsiness of the articulatory loop and step out of the theoretical manual into the practical application.
Which brings us to a final thought for you to mull over as you approach your next learning challenge. If we accept that mastery, fluency, and true confidence are built exclusively through the friction of execution and the data gathered from errors, then perhaps we need to radically redefine our objectives.
I like where this is going. What if the goal for your next spontaneous conversation, your next project meeting, or your next practice session shouldn't be to flawlessly execute and avoid mistakes entirely? What if, instead, your actual deliberate goal should be to bravely and intentionally make at least 3 new mistakes?
You can study a complex subject for like 5 solid years.
Well, easily.
Right. You ace every single written exam. You possess a vocabulary that basically rivals a dictionary.
And then you completely freeze.
Yes. You just freeze. The second a stranger looks you in the eye and asks something incredibly simple, like, what's your favorite food?
It is so common. It happens to almost everyone.
Today we are looking at this phenomenon, the fluency freeze, and how the secret to hacking your brain's language center might just be, well, sitting right on your dinner plate.
Yeah, because the gap between knowing something on paper and actually executing it in real time, it's one of the most frustrating cognitive bottlenecks we experience.
Oh, for sure.
We're pulling from a really fascinating set of source materials today, centered around the story from the Easy English podcast. It's about a language learner named Sophie.
Right.
And her experience perfectly illustrates how finding an emotional anchor can just entirely dismantle that bottleneck.
Okay, let's unpack this, because our mission for today's deep dive is to figure out how a seemingly trivial conversation about, a slice of pizza can actually unlock language fluency.
Yeah.
And how it can override that deep-seated speaking anxiety and ultimately create profound human connections. But to understand the solution, we really have to look at the mechanics, right?
Exactly. We need to look at what happens in the brain when we try to communicate under pressure.
So tell us about Sophie.
Well, we see this classic split with her. The split between passive comprehension and active production. Sophie's situation is just the perfect case study.
She's a very dedicated student, right?
Oh, she is the quintessential meticulous learner. She studies every single day. She listens to podcasts, she watches videos, she reads English books in all her free time.
So her passive vocabulary is massive.
Huge. But speaking remains this almost insurmountable hurdle for her. When someone asks her a question in English, she just panics.
Her brain just shuts down.
Pretty much. It immediately fixates on the fear of making a grammatical error or, forgetting a specific word.
It's the academic equivalent of studying the theory of riding a bicycle for years.
That's a great way to put it.
Right. You read all the manuals. You understand the physics of balance and gyroscopic momentum. You know the names of every single gear and sprocket.
You've got all the data.
Exactly. But none of that theory actually stops the wobble the moment someone hands you the handlebars.
Yeah.
Knowing how a bike works on paper just doesn't translate to muscle memory when you're actually on the seat.
No, it doesn't. And the wobble happens because reading and listening engage an entirely different cognitive system than active speaking does.
Oh, really?
Yeah, when Sophie is reading, she controls the input. She controls the pace.
You can stop and think.
Right. Speaking removes that safety net completely. It requires this rapid, real-time data retrieval while you're simultaneously managing social dynamics.
Which is stressful enough on its own.
Exactly. And when you add performance anxiety to that equation, the brain's executive function just gets overwhelmed.
Wow.
In linguistics, this is often referred to as the affective filter. It's basically a psychological wall that goes up when we feel stressed or self-conscious, and it literally blocks access to the vocabulary we have already stored in our brains.
Which perfectly sets up this incredibly high-stakes moment in her classroom. It is the moment she is essentially forced to grab the handlebars.
The dreaded speaking prompt.
Yes. Her teacher walks in, carrying a notebook, and writes this single prompt on the whiteboard. Talk about your favorite food for 2 minutes.
And 2 minutes sounds like an absolute eternity when you're staring down the barrel of public speaking, especially in a language you're not confident in.
Oh, I would be sweating.
For many students in that room, though, it's an easy assignment. They start chatting, they're smiling, jotting down little notes.
It's Sophie.
Sophie's immediate internal reaction is just pure panic. She's thinking, what can I possibly say for 2 whole minutes? It's only food.
It's only food. That framing is the trap right there.
Yeah, it is.
She is viewing the topic as entirely shallow and transactional. She thinks she's being asked to, recite a grocery list or read a menu out loud to the class.
Right. But then, sitting at her desk that evening, she's forced to confront the assignment. She finally asks herself the core question, what actually is my favorite food?
And the answer is instantaneous.
Pizza. No hesitation whatsoever. She loves the crispy crust, the melted cheese, the smell of the oven.
The good stuff.
Exactly. But notice the psychological pivot that happens next. She stops focusing on the physical attributes of the meal itself.
Okay.
The sensory details trigger this total avalanche of emotional memories. She starts picturing family dinners.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, she remembers childhood birthday parties, weekend gatherings, evenings spent laughing with friends around a table.
So the sensory details act as a sort of tripwire for her emotional memory.
They do.
It makes me wonder, is this the secret shortcut? Does attaching a daunting task, like, say, speaking a new language in front of an audience, to a deeply ingrained, joyful memory as a bypass around that effective filter we talked about?
This raises an important question, especially about what communication actually is at its core.
Right.
We so often treat language learning as this sterile data transfer exercise.
Like downloading a file.
Exactly. But food is not just sustenance. It is fundamentally connected to survival, to emotion, and to our foundational experiences with the people we love.
It's totally wired into us.
It is deeply encoded in our associative memory. So when Sophie taps into those vivid memories, she is no longer trying to just survive 2 minutes of academic speaking.
She has a real reason to speak now.
She suddenly has a story she actively wants to share. She found her why.
The motivation shifts from extrinsic to intrinsic. She isn't performing for a grade anymore. She wants to express a piece of her actual identity. But, a why without a how is just a recipe for frustration. She still has to stand up and deliver this story in a language that terrifies her.
True, and this is where her preparation method completely shifts from passive intake to strategic acquisition.
Okay, what does she do?
Instead of trying to memorize just a randomized list of dictionary words, she seeks out targeted vocabulary for her specific narrative. She uses a resource called English Vocabulary in Use.
But she's not just reading it cover to cover.
No, she doesn't browsing aimlessly. She hunts for highly specific sensory words to describe her memory. Words like ingredients, flavor, recipe, delicious, homemade, spicy, savory, crispy, fresh.
And she doesn't just isolate those words on flashcards, right? She starts building foundational syntax around them.
Right, putting them into action.
Like the ingredients are fresh, the crust is crispy, this recipe is homemade.
She is building the architectural scaffolding for her story. And then the next day, she takes it a step further. She starts reading a book called Short Stories in English for Beginners from Teach Yourself.
Okay, so seeing the words in action.
Yes. By consuming stories centered around everyday scenarios, she begins to notice the context. She sees that conversations about food aren't isolated to some single sterile chapter on dining out.
Right, they're woven into everything.
Grocery shopping, family arguments, romantic dates, casual greetings, it's everywhere.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because Sophie realizes food isn't just a classroom topic. It's a real-life utility.
Exactly. She is packing a very specific toolbox. Think of it like the difference between trying to memorize the entire inventory of a hardware store.
Just in case you might need something one day.
Right. Versus packing a targeted toolkit because you know you are building a birdhouse.
That makes so much sense.
When you know exactly what you are building, the tools have immediate value and context. She is transforming abstract vocabulary into a tool for personal expression.
Okay, but let me stop you there for a second. Because the toolbox analogy has a pretty massive blind spot. Yeah, if I pack a highly specific toolkit to build a birdhouse, I still need the physical coordination to swing the hammer without shattering my thumb.
Fair point.
In language learning, the hammer is real-time syntax and grammar. Does having the isolated word crispy written on a notepad actually stop her brain from freezing when she has to string a sentence together with her heart rate at, 120 beats per minute?
I see what you're saying.
I mean, memorizing adjectives doesn't inherently fix the fluency freeze, does it?
That is the crucial friction point. And you are absolutely right. The isolated word itself does not save her.
So it does.
What saves her is the mechanism of associative memory. By anchoring the English word crispy directly to the vivid sensory memory of her family's pizza, she isn't storing it as a random data point in her working memory.
Or she's attaching it to a feeling.
Yes, she is weaving it into a pre-existing neural pathway. Neurologically, when she accesses the joyful memory of the pizza, the targeted vocabulary gets pulled along for the ride. The emotional memory acts as the track, and the vocabulary is the train. She doesn't have to consciously search that hardware store for the word while she's panicking. The word is already loaded in her mind because it's attached to the emotion.
Ah, I see. The emotion itself is the delivery mechanism for the vocabulary. She isn't translating from her native language to English in real time. She's translating from feeling to English.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the moment of truth. Presentation day finally arrives.
The big day.
The classroom gets quiet. Her name is called. She stands up. And despite all of this brilliant cognitive mapping we just talked about, the physical reality of the situation hits her.
Yeah, the body still reacts.
Her heart is beating incredibly fast. Her voice is actually shaking slightly as she starts speaking.
Because the physiological response to public speaking is hardwired. Cortisol and adrenaline still flood the system. The fear doesn't just magically evaporate because you prepared well.
Right, so she starts very literally, focusing on the mechanics. She says, "My favorite food is pizza. I have loved pizza since I was a child. I enjoy the crispy crust and melted cheese."
Very structured.
She mentions her favorite toppings are mushrooms and olives. It is heavily structured and careful.
But as she transitions from simply describing the physical attributes of the food to describing the act of making pizza with her family, that profound shift we discussed happens in real time.
The affective filter comes down.
The narrative flow takes over entirely. She completely forgets her nerves. That affective filter drops, and she stops agonizing over the grammar rules mid-sentence.
She stops self-editing.
She stops self-editing every single syllable before it leaves her mouth.
Because she is back in that joyful memory. She is visualizing her family kitchen, not the stressful classroom.
What's fascinating here is the feedback she receives after she finishes and how she internalizes it.
What did the teacher say?
The teacher smiles and says, "Excellent work, Sophie. You spoke clearly and naturally." And Sophie feels this immense wave of pride.
That's awesome.
But she isn't proud because her syntax was flawless or her grammar was mechanically perfect, because it likely wasn't. She is proud because she achieved true communication.
She successfully transferred an entire concept, a feeling, and a memory from her own brain into the brains of her listeners.
That is the ultimate function of language.
Yeah.
We so often conflate fluency with mechanical perfection.
We really do.
But fluency is actually about flow. It is about expressing real thoughts and experiences without the mechanics getting in the way of the message.
Right.
When you care deeply about what you are sharing, the brain prioritizes the human connection over the technical rules, and the language just begins to flow naturally.
It is an incredibly liberating concept. You do not need a massive, sophisticated lexicon to be understood. You just need authenticity.
Precisely.
And once Sophie experiences this localized victory in just a 2-minute presentation, it fundamentally alters how she engages with the language as a whole. She doesn't just stop at pizza.
Oh, no. She leverages that momentum immediately. She expands her menu, so to speak.
Yeah.
She starts talking about her favorite breakfasts, traditional dishes from her home country, special holiday meals, complex family desserts. Every single one of these topics becomes a low-stakes arena for her to practice speaking.
She is getting the revs in, but now they are entirely contextualized.
Yeah.
And her input strategy evolves alongside her output, right?
Yes. She starts utilizing resources like the series, Learn English Through Stories, 16 Stories to Improve Your English. By reading diverse narratives, she really notices how deeply food and shared meals permeate all human experiences.
Whether it's a tense family dinner or just a casual restaurant conversation.
Right. The vocabulary reinforces itself because it is always anchored in human interaction.
She also incorporates audio training. Specifically, she uses a program called Effortless English. Learn to speak English like a native. And this is where she really bridges the gap between studying and doing.
How so?
Well, while she is out walking, she actively practices speaking aloud to herself.
Oh, that's smart.
Yeah, she repeats these food-related expressions like, "This meal is delicious. I'd like to try something new. What's your favorite dish?" She is actively producing the language, literally utilizing her vocal cords, but in an environment completely free of social pressure.
That combination is so powerful. That emotional anchoring, contextual reading, and low-stress verbal practice, it all culminates beautifully months later.
What happened?
She decides to join an online English conversation group. She logs into a virtual room filled with people from all over the world, representing entirely different cultures and backgrounds.
That's a big step.
Huge! And during the meeting, the host of the group asks the exact same question that paralyzed her months ago. What's your favorite food?
But there is no fluency freeze this time.
None. The affective filter doesn't even twitch. She smiles, she speaks confidently, and she shares her pizza story.
That is so great.
And what happens next is really the best part of this entire case study. Her story acts as a catalyst for the rest of the room.
It opens everyone else up.
Exactly. The vulnerability and authenticity of her memory give everyone else permission to drop their own academic filters. Another person immediately jumps in to describe sushi.
Oh, wow.
Someone else talks about pasta. Another participant breaks down a highly complex traditional family recipe. The entire group ends up laughing, exchanging these vivid, highly personal experiences.
It creates a global table.
It really does. Sophie realizes something profound in that moment. Food connects people, regardless of geographical borders or the language they are clumsily attempting to speak.
Because everyone on Earth has a favorite meal.
And more importantly, everyone has a favorite memory associated with that meal.
So what does this all mean? It means food is the ultimate universal equalizer. It does not matter if your grammar is broken, if your vocabulary is limited to 100 words, or if you have a heavy accent.
Not at all.
When you talk about the meals that shaped you, everyone has a seat at the table. It's a shared human experience that completely neutralizes the anxiety of trying to be perfect.
It provides a safe harbor for connection. In that virtual room, no one was being evaluated on their linguistic mechanics. They were simply being appreciated for their humanity and their stories.
And that brings us directly to you listening to this right now. The next time you are at a networking event, on a date, or maybe tackling a new language yourself, and someone asks you, what's your favorite food? Do not just give them a one-word answer.
Please don't.
Don't just say pizza or sushi or tacos and let the conversation die on the vine. Use it. Tell them a story.
Describe the textures.
Yes. Describe the flavors. Explain why you love it. Was it the first meal you had on a trip that completely changed your perspective? Was it a dish your grandfather spent all Sunday cooking? Every single conversation is an opportunity to practice, to express yourself, and to forge a real connection.
We've seen how food bypasses our internal language filters and our anxieties because it is so deeply tied to our emotions and our fondest memories.
Yep.
It makes you wonder, what other simple, universal, everyday experiences are we taking for granted that could actually be the secret key to breaking down barriers and truly connecting with someone new?
That is definitely something to chew on. Pun absolutely intended. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. Keep practicing, keep speaking, and above all, keep sharing your own stories. We will catch you next time. What if the reason you haven't achieved your biggest, most ambitious dream?
Right.
What if it isn't? Because the goal itself is too hard.
Right.
But because, you've never actually demanded specifics from yourself.
Yeah, that's the core of it, really.
Right. So today we're diving into what is honestly the terrifying psychology of a blank piece of paper. We're pulling apart this really fascinating story from the Easy English podcast about a guy named Daniel.
Daniel's story is it's so good.
It really is. And the mission for our deep dive today is to basically deconstruct Daniel's journey. We want to extract the exact step-by-step blueprint he used to take these massive, intimidating fantasies.
Like becoming fluent in a language.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or, traveling the world, starting a business, and force them into actual tangible reality.
And Daniel makes for a perfect case study here because his starting point is just incredibly relatable. I mean, he's a hardworking guy at a small company, but he's carrying around this massive mental inventory of aspirations.
Mm-hmm.
He wants financial freedom. He wants to speak English fluently. He wants to travel without, the anxiety of a language barrier.
Yeah, the classic dreams.
Exactly. And he wants to provide a better life for his parents. But the core issue, as the source material highlights, is that for years, these desires only existed as abstract concepts, just kind of floating around in his mind.
Like stars in the night sky.
Yeah.
Right. Beautiful, but completely out of reach.
That's a great way to put it.
I mean, keeping your dreams purely in your head is like deciding you want to go on a road trip, having a vague image of a sunny beach in your mind, but never actually typing a specific address into your GPS.
You're just sitting there.
Yeah. You sit in your driveway with the engine running, feeling the desire to travel, but you have no route. You have no turn-by-turn directions. So you go nowhere.
And the brain actually treats those two states very differently. When you just hold an image of a sunny beach in your mind, your brain registers it as a fantasy.
Okay, so it's not real to the brain yet.
Right. Fantasies provide this small, safe hit of dopamine, and they don't require any caloric output or risk. But the moment you type an address into the GPS,
you're suddenly committed.
Exactly. You are establishing a concrete objective. That requires an execution plan, which consumes energy and crucially introduces the possibility of failure.
Which brings us to this incredibly vivid moment in the source where Daniel attempts to make that shift. From fantasy to concrete objective.
The cafe scene.
Yeah, the cafe scene. So he goes to a quiet cafe after work. He sits by the window, orders a coffee, and opens a blank notebook.
Oh.
At the top of the first page, he writes 2 words, my dreams.
And then what happens?
He completely freezes.
Yeah.
He just stares at the blank page for several minutes, completely unable to write a single thing. I mean, he knows what he wants, so the sudden roadblock seems kind of bizarre, right?
It does, but it's actually a textbook biological defense mechanism.
Really, a defense mechanism against writing.
Yeah. Because up until that exact second in the cafe, he has never clearly defined his dreams. The psychology of the blank page is fascinating because of what it demands from your ego.
Oh, because he's putting it on the line.
Right. When a dream is just a vague idea in your head, it's completely insulated from failure. You can't fail at a formless wish.
You can't fail at wanting to be rich one day.
Exactly. But holding a pen and attempting to articulate the goal forces it into reality. It demands specifics. The sudden shift from a safe fantasy to a defined possibility triggers anxiety because you are suddenly, on the hook for the outcome.
You're looking at a literal contract with yourself.
Yes.
But he does push through that initial freeze, which is the important part. He starts writing, traveling to new countries, becoming fluent, opening a business, helping his family. And the source notes that the more he writes, the more excited he becomes.
Because the act of definition starts turning these abstract ideas into manageable data points.
It makes it real.
Yeah, the physical act of writing externalizes the problem. It moves the goals out of the emotional centers of the brain and puts them in front of the prefrontal cortex.
Which is the logical part.
Right, the part that handles logic and planning. But just writing a list does not change behavior.
No, definitely not.
The first true catalyst in his journey happens when he addresses the internal narrative he's been running for years.
Right. Okay, so this leads to the bookstore. He goes and picks up a book called The Magic of Thinking Big by David J. Schwartz. And according to the source, this book completely rewires his thinking.
It's a pivotal moment for him.
But wait, I have to be honest and push back here for a second.
Okay, go ahead.
I hear a title like The Magic of Thinking Big, and my immediate reaction is to just brace for, cliche self-help.
Oh, sure.
Just put a smile on, think big, and suddenly all your financial problems vanish. Come on. How does reading a motivational book actually change the boots-on-the-ground reality of Daniel's day-to-day life?
No, it's completely fair to cringe at the title. I get it. But the mechanism Daniel extracts from the book has absolutely nothing to do with toxic positivity or wishful thinking.
Okay, so what is he actually getting from it?
The book acts as a diagnostic tool for his cognitive biases. The core realization Daniel has is that he's been artificially limiting his life because he was operating under this subconscious assumption that he just wasn't the kind of person who gets to have those things.
Oh, wow.
He assumed he wasn't capable enough or smart enough or lucky enough.
So he was disqualifying himself before he even attempted the work.
Exactly. This ties into a concept in psychology known as self-limiting beliefs. But physically, it's rooted in the brain's desire to conserve energy.
How so?
Well, if your brain can convince you that a massive goal is fundamentally impossible for someone with your background, it successfully saves you from expending months of energy pursuing it.
So the brain thinks it's doing you a favor.
Yes. It's shutting down the ambition to save calories. The book removes that artificial ceiling. Daniel realizes he's been treating his list of dreams as a list of pure fantasies.
Right, and so he starts replacing statements like, I wish, with a new question.
What if? That's the turning point.
He starts asking, what if my dreams are actually possible? And what if my future can be different from my present?
And changing the question changes the entire trajectory of the brain's filtering system.
You're talking about the RAS, right?
Yes, the reticular activating system. It's a network of neurons in the brainstem. Its job is to filter the millions of bits of sensory information you encounter every day and only bring the relevant data to your conscious attention.
Right, like when you buy a red car and suddenly you see red cars everywhere.
Perfect example. So when Daniel asks, what if my dreams are possible? He programs his RAS to start looking for evidence of opportunity rather than evidence of limitation.
That's huge. Because a fantasy asks for nothing from you, but a goal demands a plan. But believing you can build a business and learn a new language is actually incredibly dangerous without a plan. Because the sheer size of those goals, once you realize they're possible, suddenly becomes paralyzing all over again.
Oh, definitely. The overwhelm kicks in.
Right. If you truly grasp the amount of hours required to become fluent in English, the friction is staggering.
Which is why the antidote to that secondary paralysis is building a system.
Yes.
And this is the second catalyst in Daniel's story. He discovers the book Atomic Habits by James Clear.
A classic.
Yeah. And the revelation here is a fundamental shift in how we approach achievement. Success isn't created by one giant overnight action.
Right.
It is created by small actions repeated consistently.
So Daniel takes this philosophy and he creates a really specific 5-part daily blueprint.
Let's hear it.
His daily plan is practice English for 30 minutes, read 10 pages of a useful book, exercise 3 times a week, save a small amount of money each month, and learn one new thing every day.
Notice the architecture of that list. Simple
Right.
habits, small actions.
But again, I have to play devil's advocate on this system.
Okay.
I look at that list reading just 10 pages, saving a few dollars a month, doing 30 minutes of English. That feels agonizingly slow.
It does seem small.
If you want to build a whole business or become fluent in a foreign language, doesn't that require massive, aggressive action? Like, if he only reads 10 pages a day, isn't he just dragging out the process unnecessarily?
You're right to be skeptical. I mean, if your timeline for fluency or starting a business is next Tuesday, then 10 pages a day is utterly useless.
Exactly.
But Daniel has realized that massive, aggressive action is a biological trap.
A trap.
Yeah. Think about what happens when people rely on massive intensity. They decide to change their life, they study for 4 hours a day, they go to the gym for 2 hours.
And they completely burn out by day 4.
Exactly. The motivation crashes.
Because it's just too much.
The motivation crashes because the friction is too high. Massive action requires a massive amount of willpower, and willpower is a finite, depletable resource.
That makes sense.
By shrinking the tasks down to almost comical sizes, like reading just 10 pages, Daniel removes the friction. He bypasses the brain's panic button.
He doesn't need to fundamentally overhaul his entire existence overnight, which, is terrifying to the nervous system.
Right. He just has to commit to 10 pages.
And mathematically, the compounding effect of that low-friction system is shocking. 10 pages a day doesn't feel like a heavy lift, but that is roughly a 300-page book every single month.
Which adds up fast.
It translates to 12 life-changing books a year, compared to the 0 books he was reading when he was just staring at a blank page, paralyzed by the size of his dreams.
It is the shift from intensity to consistency. And let's look at how he actually implements this system, because the source gives us this brilliant case study of Daniel hacking his own learning process.
Specifically targeting his biggest immediate hurdle, which is learning English. So he tackles his English goal with a specific content stack. He starts with reading, using a book called Short Stories in English for Beginners. And I love that the source is very honest about the reality of this phase he struggles.
Oh yeah, it's not easy at first.
The words are unfamiliar, the sentence structures are complex, and it is frustrating. But he pushes through, page by page, day after day.
And we should unpack the mechanism of why reading short stories is so much more effective than just, memorizing a dictionary.
Okay, yeah, let's break that down.
When Daniel reads a story, his brain is acting as a prediction machine. He encounters an unfamiliar word, but the surrounding context clues the actions of the characters, the setting.
They allow his brain to guess the meaning.
Exactly. And this forces deep cognitive processing. It builds neural pathways that link the new vocabulary to real-world scenarios rather than isolated definitions.
Right. And he supplements this contextual reading with targeted vocabulary work using a book called English Vocabulary in Use.
A great resource.
And his strategy here is the perfect embodiment of his new mindset. Instead of sitting down with a stack of flashcards and trying to cram 50 or 100 words into his brain in one grueling session.
Which never works.
Never. He limits himself. He restricts his learning to just 5 words a day. 5 today, 5 tomorrow.
Consider the alternative. If he tries to cram 50 words in an hour, he is storing that information in his short-term memory.
Which is temporary.
Highly temporary. Within a few days, he'll fall victim to the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's a psychological concept that shows how rapidly we lose memory when there is no attempt to retain it. By limiting himself to 5 words, he avoids cognitive overload.
Right.
He has the mental bandwidth to deeply understand those 5 words, practice them, and move them into long-term memory through spaced repetition.
I mean, you literally cannot fail in 5 words. You could knock that out while making your morning coffee.
Exactly.
But again, relying on the math of compounding, 5 words a day is over 1,800 words a year.
That's a massive vocabulary.
You drop 1,800 new, deeply understood words into your vocabulary, you are fundamentally changing your ability to communicate in that language.
He is choosing guaranteed, low-friction daily success over the high probability of burnout.
The other tactic that really jumped out at me from the source was how Daniel changes the actual physical environment of his learning.
Oh, this is a great part.
He downloads an audio program called Effortless English. But he doesn't carve out an extra hour at a desk to listen to it. He listens during his commute. He listens while walking. He listens while waiting in line at the grocery store.
He is reclaiming his dead time.
Dead time, yes.
This is a brilliant strategy for reducing friction. He isn't creating new time slots in his day. He is stacking his new habit onto existing automated behaviors like walking or commuting.
And doesn't that help with memory, too?
It does. It introduces the benefit of context-dependent memory. By learning English in various environments on the train, in the store, on a walk, he trains his brain to recall the language in dynamic, real-world situations.
Instead of just in the quiet of a study room where everything is perfectly controlled,
Exactly.
he weaves the goal into the fabric of his existing life,
Right.
which perfectly sets the stage for the climax of his English journey.
The big test.
Right. Several months into this daily grind of 10 pages, 5 words, and audio lessons, this unexpected opportunity arises at his company. An international client visits the office.
A high-stakes situation.
Very. And you can easily imagine the scene. Everyone in the office is terrified, looking down at their shoes, avoiding eye contact, because nobody wants to stumble through a conversation in broken English with an important client.
Right. The pressure is on.
But Daniel volunteers.
And the source notes that his heart is beating quickly. The daily system did not magically eliminate his human fear.
He's still nervous.
Oh, his amygdala is still firing, signaling a high-stakes social situation.
But the daily system prepared him to execute, despite the fear. The client asks questions, and Daniel responds. The conversation just keeps flowing.
Because his baseline level of competence has risen so high that his quote-unquote nervous performance is still fluent.
Yes. And the payoff is this incredible moment at the end of the meeting where the international client looks at him and says, "Your English is excellent."
It is the ultimate real-world validation.
It really is.
I mean, he remembers a time when he froze at a cafe table just trying to write down the words "my dreams," and now he is conducting professional business in a second language.
The abstract fantasy is now a concrete reality.
Exactly.
It's an undeniable win. But I really appreciate that the source doesn't just end the story there on a freeze-frame high five.
Because real life doesn't work like that.
Right. Real life doesn't sustain that level of adrenaline. That meeting was a massive spike of validation, but motivation inevitably fades.
The post-victory slump is a documented psychological phenomenon. The dopamine hit from the client meeting wears off, and Daniel is left facing the reality of his remaining larger goals.
Like achieving financial freedom and actually launching the business.
Right.
The source acknowledges that Daniel faces really hard days. He gets tired. The daily grind of 10 pages and 5 words starts to feel agonizingly slow again.
The novelty wears off.
Yeah. He begins questioning if he will ever achieve those broader, more complex dreams. You put in the work, but there is no immediate visible evidence of progress.
This phase is known as the plateau of latent potential.
Oh, well, what's that?
Well, the source gives us this vital lesson Daniel remembers from his reading. Growth is invisible in the beginning. It's exactly like planting a seed.
Okay, right.
You dig the hole, you plant the seed, you water it every single day, and for weeks you look at the dirt and absolutely nothing is happening on the surface.
It just looks like a patch of dirt.
Right. It feels like your effort is entirely wasted, but underneath, the seed is germinating. It's building a root system.
The work wasn't wasted. It was just happening underground.
Yes. The energy was fundamentally changing the structure of the system, even if the visible sprout hadn't materialized yet. Daniel has to trust the underground process to get through those dark, unmotivated periods.
The daily habits are the watering.
Exactly.
This concept anchors a really pivotal conversation he has in a park with his friend Alex. They're talking, and Alex just flat out asks him the question we all secretly wonder when we're grinding away on a long-term goal.
The big question.
He asks, "Do you really believe you'll achieve all your dreams?"
And Daniel's response here reveals the final structural shift in his identity.
He tells Alex, "I don't know exactly when, and I don't know exactly how, but I know something important. If I keep improving every day, I will eventually reach places I can't even imagine right now."
It's a profound answer. Daniel has completely surrendered the timeline.
He's let go of the control.
He is no longer obsessing over the distance between his current reality and the ultimate destination. He isn't worried about whether the seed is going to sprout tomorrow or next month.
He's only focusing on watering it today.
Yes, he trusts the mathematics of daily improvement more than he trusts his momentary feelings of motivation.
I will reach places I can't even imagine right now. Operating from that mindset completely neutralizes the fear of failure.
Because it's not about forcing a highly specific outcome on a tight schedule.
Right. It's about building a machine that consistently generates competence, trusting that the outcomes will naturally take care of themselves.
The shift from an outcome-focused identity to a system-focused identity is complete.
So bringing this all back to you, listening right now, the primary takeaway from Daniel's journey is blunt, but it is deeply true. The act of dreaming changes absolutely nothing.
Not a single thing.
You can analyze your fantasies all day long, but analyzing a fantasy does not burn calories or build neural pathways. Action changes things. Systems change things. Small, almost embarrassingly tiny, low-friction habits repeated consistently change things.
Every massive, complex achievement in human history, from learning a language to launching a global business, began as an abstract thought. The only differentiating factor is that someone eventually decided to force that abstract thought onto a piece of paper, accept the friction of reality, and execute the smallest possible next step.
So the question to ask yourself is this: what is the one small action, not next year, not when you have more time, but today, that you can take towards your own defined goal?
Exactly.
What is your version of the 10 pages? What is your version of the 5 vocabulary words? Because your future is quite literally being compiled by the small actions you are running in the background today.
There is a final, slightly provocative thought to consider here as well.
Oh, lay it on us.
Well, we've spent our time deconstructing the compounding power of small, positive, daily habits. We see the mechanics of how 5 words a day snowballs into absolute fluency. But mathematical logic is completely neutral. It works in both directions.
Oh man, the dark side of the compounding equation.
Right. What is the compounded future cost of the small, seemingly harmless negative habits we repeat every day?
That's a scary thought.
The extra hour of scrolling on your phone, the decision to hit snooze and skip the workout, the choice to stay quiet in the meeting instead of offering your idea.
Yeah.
If daily action is actively building your ideal future, we must recognize that our daily inaction is also quietly, ruthlessly constructing a reality. What reality is your inaction building right now?
If you aren't watering the seed, you are guaranteeing it never grows. That is a heavy but incredibly necessary reality check. So grab a notebook, write down the dream, stare down the blank page until it stops being terrifying, and take that first tiny low-friction step. You don't need a massive overhaul today. You just need your 5 words. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.